A lot of times when I'm teaching about plants, what I'm actually teaching is nature connection. And I feel like we make nature connection hard, and it's really super duper easy. So, if you're looking for a way to connect more deeply with the plants and with nature, here are my top 10 tips. So, the first five are really easy because they have to do with our five senses. So, number one. First, this is a cool concept that a teacher named John Young teaches about, but it's actually goes way, way back to indigenous folks and also is current because indigenous people in parts of the world still do this today. And that is what John Young calls having a sit spot. But this would be common like if you were hunting, say. So you would have to sit in a place for a long time and just observe quietly. So what we can do is pick a spot, especially one that's right outside our house or one we go to every day, and we can sit there for 5 to 20 minutes a day and just observe and see what we see. So speaking of seeing, our first sense is sight. And so when we're in that sit spot, we can just look around us. And if you're the kind of person who is really into quantifying things, then you can count how many different species you see. Even if you don't know what species are, that's fine. Just how many different plants do you see? Even if you can't identify them, you can tell that they look different. How many different birds do you see? How many different trees? So things like that. Use your sense of sight. Start noticing things like colors. How many different colors of green can you see? Even in the trees right behind me, there are so many different colors of green. So start differentiating that in your brain. And the more that you start seeing those differences, the more you'll start seeing. It's really super cool. People often ask me, wow, how did you see that plant that's so tiny, or that mushroom that was 10 feet away amongst the leaf litter? Or how did you see that hawk that was 50 yards away? Well, I'm a forager and I have foraging eyes, so they've gotten really used to picking out little things amongst big things. So the more that you do this, the more practice you'll get and the better that you will be at finding things. It's pretty awesome. So let's talk about our sense of hearing. If you're in that sit spot or you're just hanging out outside sometime, how many different sounds can you hear? What natural sounds can you hear? What non-natural sounds can you hear? And also, some of these observations can make us better foragers and wildcrafters in a lot of different ways. So one of those ways would be that if we start hearing sounds that might help us identify the habitat that we're in, and we find a plant there, then we would know, hey, this plant likes this habitat where I'm hearing running water, so it must really like moist environments. So I know the next time I'm by a creek, I'm going to be looking for something like wood nettle, right? So the next sense is smell. We might not think of this one as much as a forager, but or an herbalist or whatever you choose to be into in the plant world. But it is really important, right? There's this thing in herbalism called organoleptics. It's a really big fancy word for something super simple. And that is a way of identifying plants by using our senses. So we can smell that plant and see if it smells like what it's supposed to smell like to identify it. Now, of course, you have to know that plant already, but this is a way to get to know that plant if you don't know it. So maybe you identify it with the help of a teacher or a book, and then you smell it. And once you've smelled it, you'll probably always know that smell, especially if it's really strong, like something like valerian. Or something yummy like oyster mushrooms. Oyster mushrooms have this smell that I can only describe as oysterish. So get in the habit of smelling plants. I feel like a lot of people don't do that, but it's actually a really great way to identify things. Okay, what about our sense of touch? That is a great one. And so, say you're in your sit spot or you just come outside to take a break one day and notice what you feel. You can definitely touch what's around you. So, you can touch the plants. You might be able to feel their veins or feel that they have a really scratchy surface. There's so many names for scratchy in botany, it's ridiculous. But something like Jerusalem artichoke, it's sometimes described as scurfy. I love that word, but it means that those leaves are really scratchy. So things like that are important. We can feel the bark of a tree, and that can let us know, it can really clue us in. Once we start touching that, we might notice things that we hadn't noticed just looking at it, right? So start touching things more, and also notice, what are you feeling on your skin? Are you feeling a breeze? Are you feeling some coolness or some heat? That might clue you into what kind of habitat you're in too, and what plants like that kind of habitat, because they're in that habitat too. All right, so taste. This is one we have to be careful with, of course, because as I always preach, you only want to put anything in or on your body if you are 100% sure of its identification. Right? Promise me. So if you are 100% sure, maybe it's something easy like a dandelion or a violet, then you can taste it. And that taste is going to tell you a lot about the plant. So it's going to help you to know who it is. Of course, you've already identified it though, right? But it's going to teach you about its herbal properties. So it will teach you, is that plant astringent? Is it sour, which means it probably is astringent, which means that it's going to have particular qualities about it. Maybe it will be cooling. Maybe it'll help your digestion. If something tastes minty, then it might help your digestion, right? If something is bitter, it might be great for your liver and your digestion. If something is warming, that is a great quality to know about an herb too, because we might want something, especially going into the cold season, that is warming. Okay, so we need 5 more, right? So one practice that I've adopted that I absolutely love, and you don't have to be an artist to do this at all, I talk about it in my Botany Breakdown virtual course, is drawing the plants. And I swear you don't have to have any artistic talent. I'm often amazed by people who say they have no artistic talent, and then I look at their drawings and I'm like, what? But even if they look like a tiny child drew them, it's great, because how it looks isn't important. What's important is that you're seeing that plant. We often see characteristics when we draw the plants that we would not see otherwise, because they're tiny or they're easy to overlook. So try that for sure. You can even put them in a journal, and it can help you to keep record of the plants that you have seen and the things that you've been learning about them. And speaking of keeping a journal, writing about plants and things that you see in nature can really help you connect with them more deeply. So keeping a journal, making a drawing, writing about the plants. You could write poetry about them. It doesn't have to be rhyming. You could write a little story about them. You could just write your observations. You could keep a foraging journal or a wildcrafting journal about where you found that plant, what you noticed about it, the habitat in which it was growing, what it tasted like that day, how many plants there were around it, how it smelled, things like that. So that will help you learn more and connect more. Another thing you can do is create a community around nature. So bring some friends, bring some family members out with you, especially bring some kids, and observe together. Sit quietly with the plants, create your own sit spot, and see what you notice, and then come back together as a group and share that. And I bet that some of the folks with you will have noticed something that you didn't notice, and you noticed something they didn't notice. So it helps you to connect and learn. And then teach about the plants. So when we teach about the plants, it helps us connect more and it helps us to learn better, because the best way to learn is to teach, right? Of course, only teach what you know, don't teach what you don't know. But sometimes you might have to research more, so you'll create more connection that way, in order to be able to teach. But you'll also turn all these other people on to plants and nature, which is a huge benefit, right? And again, they'll probably notice something that you don't notice. So lastly, but very important, is learning. So always continue to learn. You can do this easily now because there's a wealth of information that is easily accessible. Of course, we want to check it. If you find things on the internet or even in a book, they might not always be true, right? So I love to cross-reference with multiple sources. But learn from a book, learn from a website, especially learn from other people. They don't have to be what you would usually think of as a teacher. It could be some old timer from your community, some elder who has just hung out in nature their whole life, or who was a hunter and learned about the plants that way, some elder herbalist, someone like that. Just keep learning. It's so important. And you'll connect with the plants and nature in a different way and get a new perspective. So I hope you enjoyed my top 10 tips for nature and plant connection. If you have others, please leave them in the comments below. If you liked this video, please like it below. Please subscribe to the Wander School channel. Please share with your friends. Okay, happy learning and connecting.